come a special report from the Czech Republic. A city derby you may not know too much about. Slavia against Sparta Prague. When it comes to rivalry, the one between Sparta and Slavia in Prague divides the country.
The Prague derby is the climax of the season. Everybody looks forward to it. The old, the young, grandmothers, little kids. The nation's simply divided, or rather Prague is divided into two camps, with about the same number of fans. It's the biggest day of the year in Prague.
It's hyped up, aggressive, and for the fans, it's the match of the year.
It's the match of the season, for both players and fans.
It was more than just a league match. It was an amazing thing when we won. Amazing.
It's the most watched match in the whole league. The entire Czech nation is divided into Sparta fans and Slavia fans, and everybody's interested in the outcome of this match.
Barto zkusí z první a nakonec Novotný snižuje Sparty. 23. kola Gambrinus ligy Tomáš Jun a gól 2-0. Vytáhl už je v pokutovém území, tam to vypadalo na ruku a je z toho nakonec přece jen druhý gól. Znovu Tomáš Došek.
The two clubs from the Czech capital, Prague, have enjoyed a 114-year conflict that continues to this day. The whole of Prague divides into two distinct camps. One Sparta, the other Slavia, Prague's oldest and most successful clubs.
The Sparta-Slavia rivalry goes back to the very beginning. It's been there in every generation. There's always been these clashes. Who was Sparta, and who was Slavia was Slavia. This was something in your blood, something which could not be changed.
The game is an explosive and captivating affair, drawing on passions and emotions from players and fans alike. But behind the football lies an incredible history.
The rivalry developed in such a way that Slavia were originally an intellectuals club. They were actually a students' association and always fought hard against Sparta. That's how these derbies came about and why they still continue to this very day.
Between the two world wars, Czechoslovakia became a major force in world football. In 1934, the national team reached the World Cup final at the first attempt. It did so with a team made up of 8 Slavia and 3 Sparta players. Domestically, the two clubs dominated the game, sharing all but one title during this era.
In the 1920s, Sparta-Slavia derbies were on a different level. It was all over the papers, pages full of articles with who was going to play, who'd be the referee, what the starting lineup would be. They even had adverts on the radio, so the attendance was huge. There were 20 to 30,000 fans.
Sparta was named after the ancient Greek city of the same name, inspired by its reputation of courage and strength. So it was fitting then that from 1920 they became known by another name, Iron Sparta.
The term Iron Sparta first appeared in 1920 and lasted until 1928. The club was invincible in Europe. They won every game they played. In 1926 they travelled to America, representing our country very successfully.
They're nicknamed Iron Sparta because from 1920 through to 1923 they didn't drop a single point in the league. For 4 seasons in a row they were Czechoslovakian champions and achieved superb results on the international scene.
But from the late 20s onwards, Slavia were dominant. They were the outstanding team of both Czech and European football. And in 1937, an Austrian striker would take them to even greater heights. Josef Pepe Bítzan.
Bítzan was the star, often getting 3 or 4 goals a game. The Sparta defenders would prepare for him the whole season before the derby, in an effort to keep him at bay and prevent him from scoring. But Bietzen was so good that he always managed to break free and scored the decisive goals. And at that time, those were the goals that fired Slavia towards so many titles.
Bietzen is still revered by Slavia fans today. In his 8 seasons, he scored 328 goals and reserved his finest performances for the derby.
Bietzen's main asset was simple, his ability to get goals. Even today, he's the top scorer in the derby. 35 goals in the 37 derby matches he played.
But the war and subsequent communist takeover of Czechoslovakia in 1948 signalled the beginning of the end for Slavia. The club would have to wait another 49 years for their next title after being heavily persecuted during the communist era. Worse still, a new club, Derby Prague, founded by the Czech army in 1947, was to strip Slavia of its very best players in a bid for instant success.
Derby was a club that drafted players, the best Slavia players, into military service. The players spent 2 years there. Some signed contracts to stay another 5 or 10. They were even given ranks. This was how Derby drafted the best players from the league and how they became the top team. They went on to win 11 titles.
At that time, Slavia had excellent players who were drafted, or maybe we should say headhunted, by what was then called the ATK, Army Physical Education Club, which later became the Central Army House. That meant that Slavia was significantly weakened, so weakened in fact that they didn't have any players, so they ended up using junior players. In 1951 they finished 4th from the bottom, and so they were relegated from the league.
It's perhaps the history and prestige of Sparta and Slavia that has kept both clubs alive today. And Derby Week can never come soon enough. It's a game that's lived and breathed by the people of Prague all year round.
It means so much for both sets of fans, not to mention the players themselves, because it's always the match of the season, the big one. And it's written about practically 3 months before the game.
Slavia are the poorer relations in the city, their neighbours faring better post-war. So for Slavia, the derby is always a chance to change the balance of power.
People start talking about the derby at least a month before the game. The newspapers are full of stories about it, and everyone keeps telling you how you have to win that game. It's talked about so much that you realise it's massive. But when it comes to the match, and as you're getting ready for it, then the nerves really set in.
The Czech football season revolves around